She meant to call someone else. But at 12:04 a.m., her voice reached a man who hadn't been needed in a very long time. What started as a wrong number became something neither of them could walk away from. If you believe that even the smallest acts of kindness can change a life, stay with us. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you enjoy heartwarming, inspirational stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe for more. Now, let's begin. A struggling single dad got a midnight call by mistake. But she said, "I needed you more than ever." The rain had come in sideways all evening, pounding the tin roof of the modest bungalow like an angry drummer. Liam Carter wiped his boots on the mat just inside the door and quietly locked it behind him. The clock above the mantel read 12:01 a.m. The living room was dim lit only by the soft glow of a vintage floor lamp and the flickering television screen now playing static. Emma had fallen asleep on the sofa, picture book still open in her lap, her cheeks flushed with sleep. He walked over, gently adjusted the blanket around her, and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake. Liam paused there for a moment, watching her. She was the reason he kept going, the reason he kept breathing. He'd worked a double shift patching an emergency boiler leak in a rundown apartment block where the heating had failed. His fingers were cracked and raw from the cold, the tips still stained with rust and sealant. But it wasn't the work that tired him. It was the silence. The silence that used to be filled with laughter, with her voice. He reached for his phone, which sat charging on the kitchen counter. One missed call from a number he didn't recognize. He frowned. Wrong number, maybe. Then it rang again. Liam stared at the screen. Unknown number. The digital clock on the microwave read 12:04 a.m. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Nothing good ever came from a midnight call. But something in the timing and the strange stillness of the room made his hand move. He answered. There was silence, and then a soft breath. Fragile. Unstable. A woman's voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call. I know I shouldn't." Liam blinked, confused. "It's all right. Who is this?" Another pause. Her voice was trembling now, raw and full of something he hadn't heard in a long time, desperation. "I thought I dialed someone else. I just needed to hear someone's voice. I'm sorry." He could have ended it there. Could have said goodnight and hung up. But something in her tone caught him by the throat. A note of something brittle, like glass about to shatter. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, just let out a shaky breath. "I'm not okay," she whispered. "I'm not okay, and I don't know how to fix it anymore." Liam's breath caught. The room around him felt suddenly smaller. "You don't have to fix it all tonight," he said. "You just have to make it through tonight." There was silence, but she didn't hang up. "Where are you?" he asked. She gave a choked laugh. "I'm not going to jump off a building if that's what you're asking." He sat down at the kitchen table, his back aching. "That's not what I asked." She paused, and for the first time her voice steadied just barely. "I'm sitting in my car. I left a party. Everyone was laughing. I felt like I was watching strangers through glass. So I walked out." "You called the wrong number," he said quietly. Maybe she murmured. Or maybe I didn't. The rain continued tapping on the windows. Emma stirred again in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible. Liam glanced over and smiled, just barely. Then his attention returned to the line. "I don't know who you are," she continued, "but your voice, it's calm, like you're someone who's used to holding things together when they're falling apart." He let that hang there for a moment. Then he said softly, "I lost someone. A long time ago. I learned how to sound steady. Doesn't mean I am." There was a soft sound, something like a sob, trying to stay hidden. "I don't want to go home tonight," she whispered. "Everything there reminds me I'm not enough. that I failed. Liam leaned forward, resting his elbow on the table, eyes fixed on nothing. Whoever told you that lied, he said. How would you know? Because I've been there. And the truth is, the only people who say you're not enough are the ones who fear they never were. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, What's your name? He hesitated. Liam. Another pause. I'm Sophie. They didn't say anything else for a while, just listened to the sound of each other's breathing. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt held. Eventually, she said, Thank you, Liam, for answering. And then, without warning, the call disconnected. Liam stared at the phone. His own reflection blinked back at him in the dark screen. He sat there a long time. Then he rose, walked over to the sofa, and kissed Emma's forehead. Good night, baby girl, he whispered. And in the quiet, where once there had been nothing, there was now a name. Sophie, and a voice he couldn't forget. Liam didn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch across from his daughter, staring at the ceiling as the old radiator hummed quietly in the background. Outside, the rain had turned to a light mist drifting through the porch light like breath on a winter window pane. Sophie. That was all he had. A name, a voice, and 1,000 silent questions. He didn't know what she looked like. Didn't know where she lived, what she did for a living, or what had driven her to make that call. But none of it mattered. What stayed with him wasn't the details. It was the weight in her voice, the ache buried in every syllable. He knew that ache. He'd carried it himself. By morning, Emma was back to her bright-eyed self. She bounced around the kitchen in her pajamas, requesting blueberry pancakes with exactly 3 chocolate chips per side, a Carter family tradition. Liam, bleary-eyed but smiling, obliged. Did you dream last night? She asked, climbing into the chair across from him. He poured the batter and glanced at her. Yeah, I think I did. What about a woman in the dark? He said, then paused, and a voice I couldn't forget. Emma tilted her head in that curious way she did when she was trying to understand something beyond her years. Did she say something scary? Liam flipped a pancake, letting the thought hang in the air. No, he said softly. She said something honest. That evening, after Liam tucked Emma into bed and turned out the light, he sat on the porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, listening to the quiet. The moon hung low, casting silver across the cracked pavement of the street below. The town was winding down, lights flicking off in windows, cars pulling into driveways. His phone buzzed just as he was about to set it down. Unknown number, 12:03 a.m. His heart thudded. For a moment, he considered letting it go to voicemail. But he didn't. He swiped to answer. Hello? There was silence. Then a breath. It's me again, she said, her voice low and cautious. I know I shouldn't have called. I couldn't stop thinking about last night. He exhaled slowly. Neither could I. A pause. Then, quieter, I thought you wouldn't answer. I wasn't sure I would, Liam admitted, but I'm glad I did. She let out a small, almost nervous laugh. Me too. This time she didn't sound quite so broken. Still brittle, still guarded, but not splintering. There was a sliver of something in her tone. Hope, maybe. Or gratitude. They talked for 20 minutes. Not about anything profound, just little things. Favorite foods, books they'd once loved, songs they secretly cried to in the car. She still didn't offer her last name, or where she lived. And Liam didn't ask. Her identity wasn't the point. It was the connection that mattered. Over the next week, the calls became routine. Always at 12:04. Always just her voice, and his. He came to expect it, like the way dawn eventually follows night. No texting, no social media, no pictures. Just real-time, honest conversations that existed nowhere but in the space between them. Some nights were quiet, their words as sparse as stars. Other nights she cried, and he listened. He never tried to fix her. That was the key. He never offered solutions or platitudes. He didn't ask her to cheer up or stay strong. He just gave her space. And in that space, she breathed. "I'm not used to this," she said one night. "Being heard." Liam was quiet. "You're not invisible. I feel it." "Well, you're not. Not to me." Silence. Then she asked softly, "Do you ever miss her?" It was the first time she brought up his pain. He didn't hesitate. "Every day." Sophie exhaled. "How do you keep going?" Liam looked at the stars overhead. "I don't. Some days I stop. But then Emma needs breakfast, or her shoelace breaks, or she wants to know why the moon follows our car." She laughed. "Kids. Built-in purpose. Something like that." She was quiet for a long moment, then said almost like a prayer, "I wish someone like you had answered my call a year ago." That same night, as Liam hung up and set the phone down, Gail, the elderly neighbor from next door, stepped out onto her porch wrapped in a thick robe and slippers. "You're out late," she called. Liam smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep." She squinted. "You've been smiling more lately. Less haunted." He blinked, surprised. "Have I?" Gail stepped down one step. Arms folded. "Don't let it scare you. Healing can feel like betrayal when grief is all you've known." Liam's throat tightened. "It's not like that." "I didn't say it was," she said gently. "I'm just saying. It's okay. Even the quietest hearts deserve to be heard." He looked down at the phone, still glowing faintly in his palm. He didn't know where this was going. He didn't know who she was or what this would become, but something inside him had changed. He didn't feel numb anymore. He felt present. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. Sophie Bennett did not believe in fate. She believed in data. In performance metrics, quarterly reports, market shifts. That's how she had built an empire, by outworking, outlasting, and outsmarting. Feelings had always been an obstacle to strategy. Vulnerability was for people who had time to fall apart. And yet ever since the first night she accidentally called him Liam, her world had begun to tilt in quiet, undeniable ways. She'd begun taking the long way home just to clear her head. She started drinking her tea without distraction, no longer drowning her thoughts in back-to-back conference calls. And worst of all, most dangerously of all, she found herself waiting for midnight. Waiting for his voice. That warm, grounded voice that never asked for anything. That never interrupted. That made her feel for the first time in years like she wasn't some malfunctioning machine. She felt like a person. Friday came heavy with clouds and an edge of frost in the air. Sophie arrived early at Bennett Media's downtown headquarters, a 20-story glass tower in the heart of the city. Her heels echoed against the marble lobby floor as she entered, nodding briefly at the security guard who greeted her like always. But nothing felt like always anymore. She walked with practiced confidence into the elevator, pressed the button for the executive floor, and stared at her reflection in the polished doors. Hair perfect. Lipstick unflawed. Not a line out of place. And yet she looked unfamiliar. Like someone pretending to be herself. The elevator stopped one floor early. The doors slid open and he was there. At first, Sophie didn't register him. Just another maintenance tech in a navy blue uniform toolbox and hand eyes scanning the wiring in the hallway junction box. Then their eyes met. Liam straightened slightly, his posture instinctively respectful. She was, after all, the CEO. But something flickered across his face. Something subtle. Recognition. Or maybe curiosity. Sophie's breath hitched. Her mind reeled. Could it be? He looked exactly like she had imagined. Not in appearance, but in presence. Solid. Calm. Not particularly polished, but real. Like a man who knew the weight of things and carried them anyway. She forced herself to step inside the elevator without hesitation, her heart suddenly racing. The doors closed. She stared at the panel. At the button for floor 20. But she didn't move. That was him. She knew it. But that couldn't be. Could it? That night, 12:04 came and went. No call. Liam sat on the edge of his bedphone and hand-thumb hovering over the screen. But he didn't call her. He'd seen her today. He was sure of it. The woman in the navy pantsuit, the CEO, Sophie. She hadn't said anything, but he'd seen the flicker in her eyes. She'd recognized him too. Maybe not fully, but enough to cause tension in the air between them. Now he wasn't sure what to do. For weeks he'd known her only as a voice, a feeling, a shared silence in the dark. But now she was real, tangible. A woman with influence and power, and let's be honest, an entire life far removed from his. What was he supposed to say to her now? "Hey, it's me, the guy from your midnight emotional unravelings. I was just fixing your building's lighting." He rubbed a hand over his face and sighed. Maybe this was the part where things broke. Maybe it was always meant to be anonymous, a brief rescue mission for two drifting souls, nothing more. Sophie sat in her luxury apartment light's dim glass of wine untouched beside her. Her phone rested on the coffee table like a loaded gun. She hated this feeling. Powerless, exposed, like someone had peeled back her armor and she couldn't put it back on. Why hadn't he called? Was he scared? Embarrassed worse, was he disappointed? She stood abruptly, pacing the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Then, without giving herself time to second-guess, she reached for her phone. 12:22 a.m. She called. It rang once, then again. "Hello?" His voice was quiet, cautious. "It's me," she said. "I didn't think you were going to call tonight. I wasn't sure you'd want me to." Silence stretched. "You saw me," she said, more statement than question. "I think so," he replied. "Did you?" "I did." Another pause. And now he asked. Sophie closed her eyes. "Now I don't know how to pretend I don't know your face." Liam exhaled. "It changes things." "Yes," she said. Then added, voice trembling slightly, "But I don't know if that's bad." Liam leaned back against the headboard, feeling something shift in his chest. Something open. "I liked not knowing," he admitted. It made everything feel simpler. "I didn't," she said, "because now that I've seen you, I can't stop wondering if you'd still listen the same way knowing who I am." "I would," he said immediately. "I'd listen harder." That silenced her. Then, softly, "I didn't expect someone like you to be standing in my hallway. You seemed too kind for this world." He chuckled. "Kind doesn't pay rent." She laughed. It was short, but genuine. "No, but maybe it saves people." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You looked strong today. In control." "That's the mask," she replied. "The voice you hear at night, that's the real me. The one I try to bury in daylight." Liam's voice was steady. "Then let's keep meeting at midnight, where the masks can fall." Sophie closed her eyes. "I'd like that." They didn't speak much more after that, but both slept easier than they had in years. The following Monday arrived with the sharpness of winter returning. The air was crisp, the streets glistened with the residue of frost, and Liam found himself staring longer than usual at his reflection in the side mirror of his van before heading into work. He was scheduled for an early job routine maintenance on electrical junctions inside Bennett Media's corporate offices. Just like last week. Just like when he'd seen her. Her, Sophie. He hadn't spoken her name aloud since that last call. He wasn't sure what came next, if anything should. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just her voice, but her poise. The way her eyes had locked with his for that split second. There had been recognition there. A flash of unease. Or maybe curiosity. He couldn't tell. Liam had always been good at keeping things separate, compartmentalized. His grief in one box, work in another, fatherhood in its own sacred drawer. But Sophie, she'd slipped past all that. Somehow she'd become real in his world, and now nothing was neat anymore. Up on the 20th floor, Sophie was in her glass-walled office, staring blankly at her laptop. The numbers on the spreadsheet before her might as well have been hieroglyphs. Her assistant knocked lightly and entered without waiting. "Ms. Bennett, the tech, is here to check the electricals on the west wing. Do you want him escorted?" Sophie blinked. "Is it the same guy as last week? I believe so." Liam Carter. Her breath caught in her throat. She covered it with a cough. "No need to escort. Let him work." She waited until her assistant left before standing and walking slowly to the window. From there, she could see part of the hallway beyond the frosted glass. She watched the door across the floor open, watched him step in. Same worn toolbox. Same calm gait. Same slight tilt of his shoulders as he scanned the panels on the wall. She didn't approach. She couldn't. Not yet. That night, Liam tucked Emma into bed, and as he turned off her nightlight, she spoke through a sleepy yawn. "Did you talk to your lady friend today?" He chuckled softly. "What makes you think she's my lady friend?" Emma sat up on one elbow, her curls tousled. "You smile when her name is on your phone." Liam paused. He hadn't realized he'd smiled. Not in a long time. "She's not exactly a friend," he said slowly. "We just talk." "Then maybe you should make her one," Emma mumbled, sinking back into the covers. "Friends make people feel better, like how Mrs. Gale gives us cookies when you look tired." He laughed, walked over, and kissed her forehead. "I'll think about it." When 12:04 arrived, Liam was already holding his phone. It didn't ring. At 12:05, he gave in and called her. It rang 3 times. "Hello." Her voice was breathless, not out of surprise, but anticipation. "I wasn't sure if you'd call," she said. "I wasn't sure if you wanted me to." "I waited," she whispered, "but I was afraid. I don't know what to say now that we've seen each other." "You don't have to say anything." "Yes, I do," Sophie said. "I need to explain." Liam sat down the line between them, stretching with tension. "I've never called a stranger before," she began. "Never opened myself up like that. But I was breaking. And then your voice." She paused. It felt like the only real thing I'd touched in months. He stayed quiet, letting her speak. "And now I know who you are, what you do, where you stand when you're not just a voice in the dark." He took a breath. "And I don't know how to handle that," she said honestly. "You're grounded, steady, and I feel like I'm one crisis away from shattering in public. You think I don't feel the same." Liam's voice was calm but edged with emotion. "You think I haven't had to hold my daughter in one hand and my sanity in the other." The line was silent. I wasn't trying to pretend, he continued. I just didn't want to ruin what we had by dragging it into daylight. Sophie's voice softened. "Maybe we're just scared that something good can't survive outside the dark." Liam let that sink in. Then he said, "I'd still listen. Whether you were a name a CEO or a stranger in the night, I'd still care." A shaky exhale. "Why?" "Because you never asked me to be anything but human. And that's a rare gift." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "I don't know how to be anyone else anymore, Liam." "Then don't," he said. "Let the mask fall. I'll still be here." The next morning, Sophie walked into her building, passed through the lobby like she always had, but this time her gaze flicked toward the maintenance desk. He wasn't there, and for the first time in weeks, she missed him in daylight. That same morning, Liam found a note tucked under his toolbox in the garage, hand-delivered by courier. It read, "I've decided not to run anymore. If you're ever ready to meet me under the sun, I'll be in the lobby. No mask, no name. Just me. S." He stared at the paper heart pounding not out of fear but anticipation. For the first time in years, someone wasn't walking away from the broken parts of him. They were walking toward them. The lobby of Bennett Media was a cathedral of glass and steel shiny surfaces, high ceilings, and cold air conditioning that hummed like distant wind. Sophie stood near the large, curved window facing the street, dressed not in her usual blazer, but in a soft cream sweater and jeans. Casual, unassuming, like someone trying for once to just be enough. The receptionists gave her curious glances. She never loitered. She never arrived without a meeting. She ignored them. She was waiting. The seconds ticked past noon, and for a moment doubt crept in like a cold draft. Maybe he wouldn't come. Maybe she'd ruined something that had only worked because it wasn't real. Then the front doors slid open. Liam stepped inside, toolbox in hand, wearing his standard navy workshirt sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms. His boots tracked melted snow behind him, and his hair was still damp from the wind outside. Their eyes locked. Everything else vanished. No marble, no glass, no cold. Just the two of them, one woman shedding the weight of control, and one man carrying the quiet strength of survival. Liam slowed his pace but didn't stop. Sophie stepped forward. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He returned a small, cautious smile breaking across his face. "You came. You asked." They stood awkwardly for a moment, surrounded by a world that didn't quite know what to do with them now that they'd stepped into it together. Sophie took a breath. "I don't know what this is, or what it's supposed to be. Me neither. But I don't want to go back to pretending," she said. "Not after everything we shared in the dark." Liam nodded. "We don't have to pretend, but we can take it slow." She smiled. "Slow's good." Just then the elevator dinged behind them and broke the moment. Liam glanced toward the sound. "I have a maintenance call on 16. Sophie gestured toward the cafe off the lobby. "Then, maybe. After I'll be here." No mask. Still me. He tilted his head slightly. "That's the version I like." And then he left, simple as that, but something in her chest felt profoundly changed. She didn't feel alone. Not anymore. That night, 12:04 came and went. No call, but neither of them reached for their phone. Some things were no longer needed in the dark. The next day, a soft knock echoed on Sophie's office door. Her assistant popped in. "Ms. Bennett, there's a little girl here asking for you. She says she knows your name from bedtime stories." Sophie blinked. "A what?" Before she could ask more, a small figure slipped past the doorframe. "Hi," said Emma Carter, a burst of energy wrapped in a lavender parka and glittered sneakers. She clutched a paper envelope crinkled at the corners and beamed up at Sophie like they'd been pen pals for years. Sophie stepped out from behind her desk. "Emma." "My dad didn't know I was doing this," Emma said conspiratorially. "I asked Mrs. Gale to walk me here after school. She knows you're nice." Well, thank you. That's very brave of you." Emma held out the envelope. "I wrote something. For you." Sophie took it gently and opened it. Inside was a drawing in crayon stick figures, one taller with brown scribbles for hair, another with wavy lines and high heels, and a little girl in the middle holding both their hands. Above it was a big blue sky, and in uneven letters, "I think we all need stars, even grown-ups." Sophie's breath caught. Emma looked up at her, eyes wide and sincere. "You helped my dad smile again. I thought maybe he helped you too." Sophie knelt slowly. "He did, Emma. He really did." "Then maybe you shouldn't just talk at night," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Maybe you should go look at stars for real. With him." Sophie laughed softly, blinking away the sting behind her eyes. "You're wise for someone who still eats cereal with marshmallows." Emma grinned. "Daddy says I get it from Mom, but I think I just watch people." Sophie reached out, brushing a curl behind the girl's ear. "You're going to be something special, Emma. You already are." Emma shrugged. "You are too. You just forgot." That evening, Liam opened the front door to find Gale holding Emma's hand, a knowing smile on her face. "Before you say anything, yes, I walked her safely, and yes, I had permission from her teacher." Emma skipped into the house as if she hadn't just given a corporate CEO an emotional epiphany. Gale leaned in, eyes twinkling. She drew Sophie a picture. Said it needed to be done. Liam exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. "Did she?" "She did. And I have to say, your kid's got taste. That woman looked like someone who could run the world. but just needed a reason to slow down. He laughed, shaking his head. She's something. So are you, Gale said. Don't let your past trick you into thinking you can't be part of something new. He didn't answer, but he looked toward the kitchen where Emma was humming and setting the table for two, and he thought, just maybe the old woman was right. Later that night, Liam received a text. It wasn't from an unknown number. Sophie, your daughter thinks we need to look at the stars. Want to take her advice? Liam stared at the screen, heart pounding softly in his chest. Not fear this time, but hope. He typed back, Liam, only if you promise to show up as you. No masks, just the woman I've been waiting to meet. They met under the stars 2 nights later. Not at a fancy rooftop or candlelit patio, but in Liam's modest backyard where a rickety lawn chair and a wool blanket became their corner of the universe. The air was cool, and a faint scent of pine drifted in from the woods nearby. Emma had gone to bed early after insisting that Sophie take the good chair and whispering to her dad that she'd already brushed her teeth twice. Sophie looked up at the constellations overhead. I forgot how quiet it is out here. Liam chuckled. That's because you spend your nights in a glass tower. She smiled but didn't look at him. It's strange. The city makes you feel important. But silence. It makes you feel honest. He glanced at her, then noticing how different she looked in the dim backyard light. Not polished, not powerful, just real. That's why I sit out here sometimes, he said, to remember what's underneath the noise. She nodded, wrapping the blanket tighter around herself. I've built a life on noise. Liam turned his eyes to the sky. Then maybe it's time to listen to the quiet. For a few minutes they sat in companionable silence, broken only by the creak of a tree branch in the wind and the hum of faraway traffic. Then Sophie spoke, almost in a whisper. Do you ever feel like you're pretending, she asked, like you're performing what people expect of you instead of just being? He didn't answer right away. Then, every day, at least until about 8 to 10 p.m. when Emma asks me to help brush her unicorn's hair, and I remember I'm just a dad trying to survive. Sophie laughed, and it was a sound Liam wished he could bottle. It wasn't refined or delicate, it was unguarded. I think I envy that, she said. That your life has something pure in it. Something that doesn't want anything from you but your presence. He glanced at her. Maybe you're just around people who forgot how to want the right things. She looked down, picking at a loose thread on the blanket. That includes me. No, Sophie, Liam said gently. You called at 12:04 because a part of you remembered who you are, past the CEO, past the image. That part of you is still there. You're just learning to listen to her again. She didn't speak, but her eyes shimmered under the stars. And for a while, that was enough. But even the most honest nights have a morning after. The next week, Sophie sat at the head of the long executive boardroom table. Her hair was pinned up her blouse immaculate, her words sharp. Around her were 8 men and women in expensive suits, but not one of them looked at her the way Liam had. And that terrified her. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't want to impress them. She wanted to be known. But the room didn't allow for that. Not in this world. Not in this company she'd built with sweat and perfection. She could feel herself slipping back into the persona, the voice, the armor. George, her longtime COO and trusted lieutenant, leaned forward mid-meeting. There's buzz around your little visitor in the lobby last week. One of the junior PR guys saw you talking to a maintenance contractor. Is that something I should be concerned about? Sophie's jaw tightened. He's a friend. George arched a brow. From what part of your world? Her silence was its own kind of answer. George exhaled, voice lowering. You have a reputation to protect. Personal stories get out, especially when they don't fit the narrative. And we both know the press will twist any crack in the armor. Sophie looked down at the table at the pen in her hand. At the reflection of a woman she barely recognized anymore. After the meeting, she walked past her office and kept going straight to the elevator, straight to the lobby, straight into the open air. That night, Liam waited for her. Not at 12:04. At 8:30, with hot chocolate and an extra blanket, watching the stars and listening for footsteps that never came. At 9:30, he checked his phone. No text, no voicemail. By 10:15, Emma wandered out in her pajamas. "She's not coming?" she asked sleepily. Liam shook his head. "Not tonight." Emma climbed into his lap, curling under his arm like a kitten. "Maybe she's scared." "Of what?" "Of liking us." Liam stared out into the night. "Maybe." Emma's breath slowed as she drifted off warm and small against him. He looked up at the sky, the same stars overhead. But tonight they felt farther away. Sophie didn't call that night, or the next. At the end of the week, Sophie found herself back in her office, staring at the framed magazine cover on her wall. Bennett Media's Woman of the Year. But all she could see was what wasn't in the frame. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't real. The version of her that sat under stars in a backyard sipping cocoa and laughing at unicorn hair was missing entirely. And she missed that version of herself more than anything. Later that night, alone in her car on a side street 2 blocks from Liam's house, she stared at her phone. She didn't dial. Instead, she whispered into the silence of her car, "I'm not okay, but I still want to try." The wind had picked up just after midnight, rustling the branches outside Liam's window. He lay in bed, one arm behind his head, the other resting across his chest phone inches from his hand. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed into you rather than offered rest. He hadn't heard from Sophie in 5 days. Not since that last night she'd promised to meet under the stars. He'd told himself he wouldn't call her, that she needed space, that maybe she'd slipped back into her old life, into the fortress of corner offices and curated perfection. But that didn't make the ache any less. He closed his eyes. And then, as if summoned by the beat between 2 heartbeats, the phone rang. Not a message, not a voicemail, a call. 12:04 a.m. Liam sat up, breath-catching, and answered without looking. "Hello?" There was a pause, a breath, and then her voice soft and frayed at the edges. "I didn't know if you'd answer." He swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure you'd call." "I almost didn't," she whispered. "I parked outside your street 3 nights ago. I watched your porch light go out. I couldn't get out of the car." Liam's chest tightened. "You were here. I couldn't face you," she admitted. "Not after disappearing like that." "Why did you—" Sophie didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice cracked. "Because I'm scared of what it means when someone sees me without the mask and stays." Liam leaned forward, fingers pressing into the blanket. "You don't have to be perfect for me to stay, Sophie. That's easy for you to say. You're grounded, real. You've lost things and survived. I've just hidden." Liam exhaled slowly. "You think I didn't hide after Claire died?" She stilled. "Claire, my wife," he said quietly. "It's been 3 years. Car accident. Emma was only 3. I hid in silence and work and keeping just busy enough not to feel the emptiness. I know what it's like to be afraid of being seen." Sophie's breath hitched. "I didn't know. I never told you. Not because I was protecting myself, but because I didn't want you to feel like you had to carry my pain, too. I wish you had told me." He smiled sadly. "I just did?" Silence settled between them, not heavy but full. Then Sophie said, "I lost someone too. My dad. A year ago. He was the only person who made me feel like I didn't have to be impressive to be loved. When he died, Brent, my fiancé, left. Said I wasn't myself anymore, but the truth is, I didn't know who that was to begin with." "Was that the night you called me?" "Yes," she said. "I left a gala. Everyone was laughing and networking and being important. I felt like I was screaming into a soundproof room. So, you picked up the phone. I didn't mean to call you. I meant to call the grief hotline. But I misdialed." Liam's throat tightened. "And still, we talked." "We did more than talk," Sophie whispered. "You reminded me I was still human, that I hadn't completely disappeared." Liam's voice was soft. "You were never gone. You just forgot how to come home." Another pause. Then, through a shaky breath, Sophie said, "Liam, I don't know what this is, but I miss you, not just your voice. You." He let her words settle raw and sincere. The woman who once spoke with polished power was now just a woman who wanted to be loved without conditions. "I miss you too," he said. "And I don't need to define this, but I do want to keep building it." "I'm not good at building," she said, almost apologetically. "You don't have to be." "I've got the tools," he replied with a gentle smile in his voice. Sophie laughed, the sound small but warm. That was terribly corny, and completely true. They were quiet for a long moment, each absorbing the presence of the other in the safest space they knew, not the daylight, not the roles they wore, but the fragile place between midnight and dawn. Then Sophie asked, "Can I come over?" Not tonight, but soon Liam's heart beat faster. Anytime he said. The porch light stays on for a reason. The next morning, Liam found Emma at the breakfast table with her cereal and her coloring book. She looked up with sleepy eyes. "Did she call?" He paused, surprised. "How'd you know?" Emma shrugged. "Because you're smiling again." Liam ruffled her curls. "She might visit soon." Emma grinned. "Then I better draw her something better than a stick figure this time." Elsewhere in the city, Sophie stood in front of her bathroom mirror wiping away the last smudge of mascara from eyes that had wept not from sadness, but from release. She looked at herself, not as a CEO, not as a woman who'd been left, not as a voice in the dark, but as someone coming back into her own skin. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "Thank you for waiting in the silence. I'm ready to be seen now." She hit send. Then she stepped into the sunlight. The invitation wasn't extravagant, no formal letter, no catered setting. Just a simple text from Sophie Company Gala this Saturday. "Come as you are. Bring Emma if she wants. I'd like you to see my world, not to impress you, to share it." Liam stared at the message for a long time. He read it twice, then again. He wasn't a gala man. He didn't own a suit. He hadn't shaken hands with men in ties since his military discharge, and even then the handshakes felt more like contracts than connection. Still, the tone of her message was gentle, honest, not a test, an invitation. That night, over dinner, he asked Emma, "You remember Sophie's Company?" Emma looked up from her plate of spaghetti. "The building with the shiny floors." "That's the one. She sent us an invitation. They're having a big party Saturday night." Emma's eyes widened. A party with real napkins and music, something like that. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Will there be dancing?" Liam smiled. "Possibly." Emma grinned. "Then you can't say no." On Saturday, Liam stood in front of the bathroom mirror, awkwardly adjusting the collar of a borrowed blazer. Gail had found it in her late husband's closet, swearing it still had charm left in the seams. The sleeves were a touch long, but the shoulders fit. He smoothed his hair, exhaled, and stepped into the living room. Emma gasped like she'd just seen Superman step off the page. "Daddy, you look like a movie star." He laughed, slightly red. "You think so?" She nodded, clutching her tiny clutch purse. "Sophie is gonna faint. Let's hope not." The Bennett Media Gala was held at the Downtown Art Museum, a breathtaking venue with glass ceilings and soft lighting that made the paintings shimmer like reflections on water. As Liam entered, with Emma, he felt every pair of eyes flick toward him. Not with malice, but with curiosity. The man in worn dress shoes. The man holding the hand of a little girl in sparkly sneakers. He almost turned back, but then he saw her. Across the gallery floor, Sophie stood beneath a suspended sculpture of cascading lights wearing a simple dark blue dress that caught the room like moonlight in motion. She wasn't holding a wine glass. She wasn't networking. She was waiting. And the moment she saw them, her face changed not for show, but for real. She smiled and it reached her eyes. She walked toward them, her steps deliberate but unhurried, as though she was walking toward the most important decision of her life and had already made it. "Hi," she said, kneeling in front of Emma. "You must be the one who gives the best advice." Emma nodded. "I told Daddy you were worth showing up for." Sophie laughed, glancing up at Liam. "She's not wrong." Then she stood. The room seemed to fade. Liam offered a hand. "You look real," she finished teasing, but soft. "Yes, and beautiful." She took his hand. "You ready to meet my world? I'm more interested in meeting the version of you that lives behind it." That stopped her, just for a beat. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Come on," she whispered. "I want you to see what I've built, then tell me what I might have missed." Over the next hour, Liam met her colleagues aboard her assistant, who eyed him with barely veiled surprise, and a man in glasses named Jonathan, who asked pointedly, "So, you're the guy?" "The guy?" Liam asked. Sophie answered, "The one who answered when I needed someone most." Jonathan blinked, then offered a respectful nod. Emma, meanwhile, stole the show, complimenting a woman's shoes, eating a mini cupcake in one bite, and asking a violinist how long it took to learn to make feelings come out of strings. But the real moment came when Sophie stood on stage to address the room. She spoke clearly, confidently, but not polished, not scripted. As most of you know, she began this year has been one of change for me personally and for the company. What you may not know is that the most valuable thing I've gained this year didn't come from strategy or sales. She paused. The room stilled. It came from a phone call. A wrong number, actually. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. I called in the middle of a panic attack thinking I was reaching a hotline. But the man who answered wasn't a professional. He was a father, a widower, a stranger who chose to stay on the line not because it was his job, but because it was his nature. She looked directly at Liam. Since then, I've come to believe that true success isn't what we build for the world, it's who we become when no one's watching, and who we choose to stay with when the lights are low. There was a hush then, quiet, genuine applause. Emma tugged Liam's hand. "She means you, Daddy." "I know," he said, voice thick. After the speech, as people mingled and music filled the hall again, Sophie returned to them. Liam met her eyes. "That was brave." "No," she said. "That was honest. I think I've spent my whole life chasing applause, but tonight I just wanted to be known." And now he asked. She reached out, fingers brushing his. "Now I want to see what it feels like. To build something that doesn't need to impress anyone." He looked down at her hand, then at Emma, spinning in circles under the twinkle lights. He squeezed Sophie's hand. "Then let's build it." On Monday morning, Sophie stepped into the executive elevator of Bennett Media with a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. The kind that doesn't come from victory or strategy, but from waking up and knowing she no longer had to perform to be worth loving. She wore no jewelry, no designer heels, just a tailored navy suit and a quiet kind of confidence. The gala had gone better than she could have imagined. Her words, raw and unscripted, hadn't just landed, they'd settled into the hearts of the people who mattered most. And Liam. He had stayed by her side through it all, not as her statement, but as her anchor. But as the elevator doors opened to the 20th floor, Sophie felt the shift before she saw it. George was already waiting by her office door. The look on his face wasn't rage. It was worse control, wrapped in politeness. "Good morning," he said evenly. Sophie met his eyes. "George, do you have a moment?" He gestured toward the glass-walled conference room where 3 board members waited inside, their expressions unreadable. Sophie hesitated. "Sure." Inside, George closed the door and turned, hands clasped like a lawyer preparing to present his case. "I'll get right to it," he said. "There's been talk after the gala." About what Sophie asked, voice steady. "About you, about your speech, about the man you brought." Sophie didn't flinch. "Liam." George gave a tight smile. "Yes." "Liam, the working-class contractor you described as the man who saved you. That's what happened. One of the board members, a woman named Diana, leaned forward. Sophie, it was a lovely speech, but it's raised questions, concerns. Concerns, Sophie repeated. George nodded. Shareholders are wondering if your personal entanglements are beginning to cloud your professional judgment. You're seen as the face of Bennett Media, and your face has always been polished, aspirational. Sophie inhaled deeply. And now it's human. That's the problem, isn't it? Diana exchanged a glance with another member. You know how perception works in our industry. Your identity has value. That value must be protected. And if I choose to protect what's real instead of what's marketable? Sophie asked calmly. George tilted his head. We're not saying you can't have a personal life, but when it becomes the headline, when it challenges the narrative, then we have to talk about optics, about the brand. Sophie stood still, but inside her something cracked. Not from the criticism, but from the realization they didn't see her. They saw what she'd built for them. And now that she wanted to be herself, she was a threat. She thought of Liam, of Emma spinning beneath museum lights, of laughter on a back porch and silence that healed. She looked George in the eye. I won't apologize for being a person, for loving someone who reminds me who I am when the noise stops. Sophie, George began, but she raised a hand. If that's unacceptable to the board, then let's be clear about it. I won't pretend anymore. I won't hide the parts of me that make me whole. No one spoke, so she turned and walked out. That evening she didn't wait for 12:04. She called Liam at 7:46. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he said. And though she wanted to be strong, the tremor in her voice gave her away. I had a meeting this morning, she began with the board. What happened? He asked gently. They told me that being with you, being myself, puts the company at risk. Silence. Then Liam's voice, soft but sure. Do you believe that? No, she said. I believe that I finally said something real, and the people who benefited from my mask got scared. He didn't speak right away. When he did, it wasn't with reassurance. It was with truth. You don't have to choose me, he said, but you shouldn't have to choose against yourself. That stopped her cold. She blinked into the quiet of her car parked outside the grocery store. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted. You're doing what no one ever taught us to do, he said. You're choosing wholeness over performance. Tears blurred her vision. Why are you so steady when I'm falling apart? He laughed softly. Because I've fallen apart before. I know what it sounds like when the pieces start to fall into place instead of away. 2 days later, Sophie stood at the head of the conference table again. Same board, same polished glass. But this time she brought a folder. Inside it, her resignation. Not a protest. Not a failure. A reclaiming. I'm proud of what I built, she told them. But if the cost of leadership is losing myself, then it's too high. This company deserves a face that's unshakable. I deserve a life that's unfiltered. Diana opened her mouth to protest. George didn't speak. Sophie smiled. Thank you. For the years. And for the clarity. That night, she walked up the path to Liam's front door with Emma's drawing in her purse and peace in her step. Liam answered before she could knock. She smiled. I quit today. He raised a brow. You okay? I've never been more okay, she said. Then added, Do you still have that porch light on? He stepped aside, voice warm. It's always been for you. The next morning, the sun spilled golden light over the kitchen counter where Sophie stood, sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes. She didn't need to. Liam was more than capable of making breakfast, but she insisted. Something about finally choosing this life made her want to live inside it. Emma sat at the table humming to herself as she drew another galaxy of crayon stars. Liam leaned in the doorway, arms folded, watching the scene with a quiet wonder he didn't dare speak aloud. You always this domestic, he teased. Sophie glanced over her shoulder. Only when I'm nervous. What for? She smiled faintly. Because this feels real. and real is terrifying. He walked over gently, took the spatula from her hand and replaced it with a cup of coffee. Then, let's be terrified together. They spent the day like a slow-breath library, books and errands, a trip to the farmer's market where Emma charmed every vendor, and an afternoon walk down by the river where Sophie kicked off her heels and waded barefoot with Emma, laughter echoing under the trees. As the sun began to dip, they returned home and sat on the porch wrapped in old blankets, sipping tea as evening came. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," Sophie admitted softly. Liam nodded. "That's the problem with survival mode. Even when you're safe, your body doesn't believe it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "So, what do? We keep showing up, until the fear runs out of breath." She smiled against his shirt. "That's poetic. That's exhaustion." He chuckled. "Poetry's a side effect." Later that evening, Emma was fast asleep with a flashlight still glowing under her blanket fort, and Liam stood in the backyard staring up at the stars alone. Sophie stepped out quietly, wrapping her arms around herself as the cool air brushed her skin. "Thought you disappeared on me," she said. "I was giving the stars a chance to show off before you came out and stole the spotlight." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "You always this charming. Only when I'm in love," he said so gently it didn't feel like a grand gesture. Just truth spoken plainly. Sophie stilled, not because she was unsure, but because for the first time those words didn't bring fear. They brought peace. She stepped closer. "Say it again." He turned to face her eyes, calm. "I'm in love with you." She took a breath. "Then I guess I should say it too." "You don't have to. I want to." She touched his face. "I'm in love with you, Liam Carter. Not the voice in the dark. Not the man I imagined. You. The man who listens when no one else knows what to say. The father who gives his daughter stars when she asks for cereal. The man who doesn't fix me, but lets me fix myself." A long silence passed between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of history, of healing, of hope. Then Liam looked up. "Dance with me." Sophie blinked. "There's no music." He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped a playlist. A soft acoustic melody began to float into the night, gentle guitar, a voice like old velvet. "Now there is," he whispered. He held out his hand, and Sophie stepped into his arms. They swayed beneath the stars, surrounded by crickets and the faint hum of porch lights. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Inside the house, Emma peeked out from her blanket fort, watching from the window with a sleepy smile. She whispered to herself, "They found it." Then she turned off her flashlight and curled deeper into her blankets, secure in a world that finally made sense. A few days later, Sophie stood at a podium, not at a press conference, but at a quiet event hosted by a local nonprofit dedicated to mental health awareness. She was no longer CEO. She wasn't there in stilettos or designer labels. She was there in flats, jeans, and her truth. Behind her, on a banner, were the words, "The 1204 Foundation," because someone always needs you most in the dark. Sophie looked out at the modest crowd and smiled. "Many of you know I left the corporate world recently. Not because I failed, but because I realized success without soul is just performance. This foundation was born from a wrong number at the right time, from a conversation that saved me when I didn't think I deserved to be saved, and from a man who stayed on the line when he didn't have to." She turned, and Liam stood at the edge of the crowd, Emma holding his hand. Both were beaming. "This foundation," Sophie continued, "is for anyone who has ever felt invisible at midnight, and for the strangers who choose to see them anyway." That night, back on the porch, as the clock inched toward 12:04 a.m., Liam glanced at his phone. It didn't ring. Instead, Sophie placed her hand over his. "You don't have to wait for the call anymore," she said. "Why?" "Because I'm already here." The seasons shifted quietly. Winter surrendered to spring, and with it came softer mornings, children's laughter in the park again, and evening skies blushing pink instead of gray. Life, Liam found, didn't announce healing like a thunderclap. It returned in whispers, small routines, familiar laughter, a home that finally felt full again. The house once shadowed by memory now bloomed with life. Sophie had moved in gradually, not with fanfare, but with toothbrushes, shared calendars, and the unmistakable scent of her coffee blend. Her shoes by the door, her laugh in the kitchen, her presence not loud but known. Emma had taken it all in stride, as children do when love walks in gently. She began calling Sophie my person at school, then bonus mom, in whispered goodnights. She asked questions like, "Do you think the stars miss us when it's cloudy, and will we still be together when I'm a grandma?" To both, Sophie had answered without hesitation, "Yes, always." One weekend afternoon, Sophie sat at the dining table with Emma, a cup of tea steaming beside her while Liam fixed a loose door hinge nearby. "What are you working on, Em?" Sophie asked. Emma held up a folded paper booklet with a crayon-drawn cover, Our Family Story, by Emma Carter. Inside were stick figures, bright colors, and short sentences scrawled in big, careful letters. Sophie flipped to the second page. It read, "My dad was sad." Then he talked to a lady in the phone. She was sad, too. Then they talked, and they were not sad. Then they hugged. Then we had pancakes. She smiled, blinking away sudden tears. "This is beautiful." Emma grinned. "It's for school. My teacher said stories help people remember." Sophie turned to the last page. "Now we are happy. I have a real home. And at night, nobody cries alone." Sophie reached out and pulled Emma into her lap. "You are going to change the world someday, sweetheart." "I already did," Emma said matter-of-factly. "I helped you both stop being scared." Liam, overhearing from across the room, placed his screwdriver down and walked over. He kissed Emma's forehead and met Sophie's eyes over her shoulder. "She's not wrong," he said. That evening they sat together on the back porch, a ritual now deeply rooted in their lives. The stars were bright, and the air smelled faintly of new grass and lilac. "I never told you something," Sophie said quietly. Liam turned to her. "That first night, the reason I misdialed. The last number of the grief hotline was a 4. I pressed a 3. Close miss, he said. Or perfect miss, she corrected, because the person who was supposed to answer did." He took her hand. "Some calls aren't wrong. They're meant to find the one who's been listening all along." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You still keep the porch light on." "Always," he said. "But now it's not for someone who's lost." She looked up. "Then who is it?" For he kissed her temple. "For everyone who finds their way home." A few weeks later, the 1204 Foundation held its first full community event, a Starlight storytelling night for families coping with grief, mental health challenges, and quiet loneliness. The auditorium was modest, filled with folding chairs, soft lamps, and warm voices. Liam stood at the back helping organize refreshments while Sophie welcomed guests. Emma was the first one to step onto the little stage. She wore her favorite yellow dress and clutched her story booklet. "My name's Emma," she said into the microphone, "and I want to tell you something real." The room quieted. "A long time ago, my daddy was sad, and a lady was sad, and they didn't know each other. But one night they found each other just by listening. They didn't even know names yet. Just feelings. And then they got brave." She smiled wide. "Now we have a home. Not a house. A real home. And I want other people to know it's okay to be the one who calls. And it's okay to be the one who answers." There was not a dry eye in the room. After the event, as they packed up chairs and folded tablecloths, a man approached Liam, middle-aged with tired eyes and a voice as soft as gravel. "I lost my son last year," the man said. "Tonight was the first time I've heard someone say something that didn't feel like pity. Just truth." Liam nodded. Sometimes truth needs a quiet place to land. The man shook his hand. "Thanks for building one." That night at 12:04 a.m., Liam's phone didn't ring. It hadn't in months, and yet he found himself glancing at it. not in fear, not in sadness, but in gratitude. Because 1204 had once been the loneliest moment of his life, and now it was a reminder that even in the darkest hour someone might be reaching, and someone might already be listening. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone who's ever picked up the phone at just the right moment, consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories that touch the heart and remind us what it means to be human. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We're honored to have you here.